I've known today's guests, Zach and Ashley, for a minute, which is exactly why I'm excited to bring you this conversation. I know the depth of experience they carry and the kind of real, unfiltered perspective they bring to the table. These are not people who are going to give you the party line. Ashley Mitchell leads marketing for East Coast Wings and Grill and has spent her career in every possible marketing seat: consumer, development, M&A, fractional leadership. Zack Fishman runs Fishman PR, the largest franchise-specific PR firm in the industry. We went deep on three pillars of any owned strategy: social, PR, and email. All three are evolving fast. AI, Google's algorithm changes, new channels popping up every quarter. Just keeping up is a challenge on its own, let alone staying ahead of it. We had some contrarian takes. We talked about why PR went from nice to have to must have almost overnight and what's driving that shift. We got into where social is actually heading, and this group had opinions. And then there's email, a bedrock channel that is about to get seriously disrupted. And if you're not making clear investments and building real strategy around it now, you're going to be behind. This show is built around exactly these kinds of conversations: what's working, what's changing, and what franchise marketers need to know as they plan for 2027. This one's a good one. Let's jump in. Welcome to this episode of Franchise Marketing Spotlight. I have two powerhouses in franchise marketing with me today, and I'm excited about today's topic. I have Ashley Mitchell and Zack Fishman. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a minute, but today's topic is going to be around PR, email, and social. And so a lot of times marketers will talk about the kind of three-legged stool of owned, earned, and paid media. So today we're really focused on that owned piece. So public relations, email, and social. But before we jump in, let me have our guests introduce themselves. Ashley, tell us more about you and your background in franchising.
All right. So as Katherine said, my name's Ashley. So I've spent my entire career in marketing communications roles. I started in franchising when I fell into it, as I've learned over the years that most people do. In 2014, after about a 6 or so year stint with the Walt Disney Company, my franchise experience really spans all over the place: consumer marketing, franchise development, mergers and acquisitions, both acquiring and being acquired by, and working with private equity firms. I've been a fractional CMO with a handful of brands in a variety of industries, including youth enrichment, beauty concepts, QSR, B2B services, a little bit of everything. And I currently lead all things marketing for a couple different brands, but for the purposes of this conversation, we'll focus on East Coast Wings and Grill.
That's a mouthful. Zach.
I was going to say, you haven't heard anything yet. Mine's going to be worse. But unlike Ashley, I did not necessarily have the power of choice when it came to getting into franchising. So I grew up in the industry. My mother is the founder of the largest franchise-specific PR firm in the industry called Fishman PR. And she's been in it for her entire career, and I found myself in it myself alongside the rest of my family. You know, I do many things within the space, but for the purposes of this conversation, of course, the PR piece, we play a massive role on the consumer and franchise development side for many brands across all different industries within franchising, including Ashley's and many others. And then in addition to that, I am a partner in a technology consultancy in the franchise space called Franchise Supplier Network that does a lot of work in the marketing technology space in particular, and really almost exclusively focused on the own media channel in particular when it comes to texting, organic social, review management, all of that good stuff.
Awesome. All right. So we've got some experts on our panel today. And as always, I'm your host, Katherine. I've been in marketing for the last 20 years, in franchise marketing for the last 13, in the executive seat as CMO for the last 8. And like Ashley, have really spanned the gamut on the types of brands as well as the life and growth stages of those brands. So excited to share all of this knowledge with our audience today. Before we jump into our topic, I did want to do a quick icebreaker. If you had to go all in on just one, PR, social, or email, for the next 12 months, which one would win and why? And Ashley, I'll go with you first.
Okay. I'm going to say PR, not just because Zach's on the call and I'm sucking up. And that's because PR encompasses so much. Like there is a little bit of social in PR when you're talking about influencers and things like that. So it's kind of cheating because you get a little bit of everything. And PR, you're telling the story, and that's really what is so, I think, important right now and what's getting lost a lot in
Mm,
what people are doing. Everyone is so focused on how do I get picked up by AI and how do I do this and how do I do that? And I think storytelling is getting lost in that
yeah.
like human connection and the authenticity. So if I had to pick one, it would be PR.
Okay, Zach, I think I know what you're gonna say, but
Yeah, I mean, my answer echoes that, but I would say that, you know, if I'm thinking about educating a prospect towards the top of the funnel, or I would actually probably choose something that's a little bit more proactive, like an email or a text, because I do think that that breaks through the noise quite a bit more.
Mhm.
Because I think that PR in the early days was considered lead generation, and I think now it is a lot more awareness based than it
Mhm.
was in the past. At least like, it kind of was around the time of, or really just before the pandemic, that flip started to
Okay.
happen a bit. And so I do think that my answer is a bit more nuanced, and I'm sorry for that, but of
That's
course
okay.
it is because that's how I am. But
No way.
I think that the PR piece has a major role when it comes to actually educating a prospect later into the process, because I think that there is nothing more powerful than convincing somebody else to write something or document something about your brand for free, right? So I mean that really does matter, and I think that that does hold high esteem. Social, I really really wish and want it to be my answer, but I think that there is just a lot of noise within that, and I think that PR, because of that, because of the notoriety of it being from a publication or from a news channel or from a podcast that people devote themselves and listen to, it has that extra air of, or stamp of approval that you can't
Mhm.
get from a social post.
And if for me, and there's two things that you guys said, or you guys both said something that I want to tug on a little bit, and I honestly can't decide either. And so if I had to lean one way or another, I think I would say email, and I'm going to contradict myself later, but I think I would say email only because if this is the one thing I'm investing in for the next 12 months, I know I could really develop a really great nurture program, email program that then can last and become a long-term bet, that will fuel retention. So I'll just be contrary and pick email because you guys both picked PR. But the thread I want to pull on is with PR. Ashley, you mentioned I'm cheating a little bit because PR is kind of like social when we get into influencers. And Zach, what you said around PR, I did PR for a hot stint and it is not for me. But one of the ways that you sell in PR is that you are getting third party validation, right? From the people that are writing about you, about your brand. So you're transferring trust between the journalist and the brand, which is one of the keys of building up a trusted brand nowadays. And starting with the rise of social, some of that trust building happens with influencers and influencer marketing. And so that's why I think Ashley kind of said it's kind of cheating because it's both. But I think that neither of you guys said in social, which is the thread I want to pull on, because I'm starting to develop a point of view around this and I want to hear your opinions. The social content. So content is king. Everybody wants to create content. We need to create content all across the board. I think what we're finding is we need to leverage that content more than just in social. We need to start putting it on our websites and having it in our email programs and stuff like that. Outside of that content creation, the role of social and a brand social channel seems to be in a bit of a shift because it's not necessarily that long form storytelling that it used to be. It's, getting virality. It's, jumping on the trends. I don't see brands leveraging their social, and I don't see customers going to a brand social to accomplish anything. Like, how are you guys thinking about or seeing social, and am I on the right track as far as I feel like this is moving a little bit? Ashley, what do you think?
Yeah, totally. It's more entertainment than it is education. And I mean, we've seen that for sure. The social posts that perform the best for us have actually nothing to do with us in some ways. Like one of our TikToks that had the most engagement was literally somebody sitting at the bar with a beer, using a spoon to eat it, and said, like, my favorite kind of soup. Yes, we have beer, but like, that's obviously not how somebody drinks a beer and whatever. It has
Right.
nothing, like, so it kind of has something to do with us, but it's so silly and stupid and whatever. And that was the one that got, 2,000 people to repost it and stuff like that. Like people want the ones that are comedic and there's people in them and whatever. They don't care about, do we still post ones that are like, come try this new LTO? Sure. But people really don't care about that.
Well, and so how does that affect your strategy? Because I'll tell you, I am working with a small brand. They only have 2 locations. And when we were talking about marketing, I was like, abandon social. You don't have the resources. I'd rather see you put resources in getting food in mouth than having a rock star social presence. And, your social presence can happen through the influencers, not necessarily through your own brand feed. And so when you see the entertainment versus education, are you really getting value out of the resources that you're investing in social?
Yeah. I mean, the way it affects our strategy, it's one of those things where it's like we have to do it, but to your point, we're not putting as much into it and we're trying to lean more into the influencer side to let others tell the story for us. Because, to Zach's point earlier, when others tell your story, the people listen more anyway. Like we can say we're great all day, but it's way more powerful when somebody else says it. And then we're also trying to really encourage, and we all know how hard this is, but really encourage our franchisees to be the ones to tell the story too, because that content is also going to perform
Yeah,
so much better than ours. Like
right.
it does not matter what we do, the local content is going to perform so much better. And
Right.
so getting our franchisees to really engage and we put out the blanket brand content, we push that down to their pages, but just continuing to beat that drum and say, just a couple times a week, please post something locally. It does not have to be polished and perfect. Like stay within this box of brand standards. Don't do anything crazy outside of that and show things we don't want to be shown. But it doesn't, you don't have to hire a graphic designer, hire a
Mhm.
videographer, do any of that crazy stuff. Just show your people in your restaurant. That's all people want to see. And I guarantee you it's
Mhm.
going to perform better. And just getting them over that hump of like either saying they don't have time to do it or being scared to do it because they don't think they can do it good enough or whatever. That is really where the social strategy needs to go because it performs so much better.
Right. Zach, what's your take on social right now?
I think that it's really, really hard for brands just based off of the way that the franchise model is set up to really actually undertake a corporate led social strategy, unless they outsource it. I just think it's hard to have the
Mhm.
headcount for that to really math out candidly. And
Mhm.
so I just
Mhm.
think that it doesn't really make a lot. I would much prefer that the social strategy is local social led rather than national social led for most franchisors, unless they are, Jersey Mike's or somebody massive where they have the
Mhm.
ability to hire like a massive firm to be able to do that for them, where they have a big infrastructure, in-house to be able to do that for them. But just most brands, the math doesn't math to me personally. I
Mhm.
just don't
Mhm.
think it really goes as far. It is super cumbersome to be able to manage, that local strategy across all of your locations, the bigger that you get, especially.
Right.
But I think that that is the thing that most brands should be focusing on. And to be fair, most brands are focused on that as well,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Have you
that's
seen
really what they think
anybody
about.
Yeah, and have you seen anybody doing it well? I mean, I have a story about a content pipeline that I developed for a brand that worked really well, and so to me, what I'm hearing is that and the next phase of social is thinking through how am I developing a local content pipeline and supporting the franchisees who don't feel like they have time for it or don't necessarily know how to post and stuff like that. Zach, have you seen anybody doing it really well? And I don't
I
need
think
names,
that
but like if there's a example of frameworks that you've seen that work.
I think that what I have seen become a lot more common, within owned, and really this goes to paid to be honest, like people are kind of creating the corporate team as almost a center of excellence where they are putting softwares in place or mechanisms in place or just systems just in general, if it's not through a software, to be able to amplify a lot of the things that they believe will work at a local level, so the franchisees don't have to do the heavy lifting, because we all know that they don't want to do that because they're busy,
They're
doing
busy,
other
yeah.
things aside from that. And so, I have kind of seen that centralized, focal point be a lot more focused on the local level and how to make the franchisees, presence, amplified rather than it focusing on the national level. It's like if they have time, sure. But I would say that that is something that I have seen, that is becoming a lot more common where, corporate teams are licensing things rather than putting it in the hands of the franchisee. that is where, it's an education thing with them where, maybe your ad fund goes up a little bit more to be able to account for that. But ultimately, what you're paying more in money, you're paying for less in time. And I
Agreed.
think that is something that I'm seeing happen a lot more often. And I think it's a good thing for the franchise space to let the franchisees be franchisees and not focus
Mhm.
on something that they mostly don't like, which is marketing. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we try to do the age old, like, spotlight on somebody that is doing it and doing it well. So, like, if somebody does a post that's great, try to share that in your communication, like, look at what so and so did. And, like, using them as the example, trying to do that sort of thing. And then the hard thing is, too, like, to your point, Catherine, you were saying you want to tell them to abandon it because of the time and the energy and like, what are you getting out of it? But then at the same time, you hear the things come out and it's like, okay, well, now social's going to be used to help you index and search
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So it's like, you can't totally abandon it because it also then has those implications too, where it's like people aren't going to it and using it for education, but at the same time, it's then going to help with your search. So you can't completely let
Mhm.
it go. So
Yeah.
all of the things.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, and Ashley, it's a good juxtaposition. So the content pipeline that we developed was around with a brand that was hyper involved. The franchisees were hyper involved in social already. They understood the importance for this specific category, and they were producing well produced local content already. And so what we did was we said, okay, you're already producing this content, but you're only using it in one channel, whether they were producing it for their paid or producing it for their social. And so we said, give us the content and we're going to cut it up and we're going to add it to your website and create a blog around it. So we're getting some SEO, GEO benefit from it. We're going to give it to your digital media provider so that it's being used in paid media because UGC and that localized content is what's winning in paid media right now. And then we're also going to package it so that you can use it on your local social. And so it was, presenting to the franchisee almost a flip because what typically brand marketing and brand marketing funds are in charge of creating assets. And at the end of the day, we couldn't produce the amount of assets that were needed. And the franchisees were already producing them. So we said, okay, give us that content. We're going to chop it up and we're going to spit it back up in these different ways, which then created a content pipeline that improved paid media, improved your website. And then we started using it in our emails and our email nurtures and using video in, how do I get people to spend more? Well, if they see another customer get excited about this product, then we're gonna add to it and they're gonna spend more on that product. And so it was a really, I thought at the time, innovative way of bringing these things to life. Now, in the restaurant space, restaurant franchisee notorious for being operator focused. Marketing is a very heavy lift for the restaurant space, and the idea of them creating their own social is terrifying. And so I can see where that framework doesn't necessarily, that pipeline doesn't necessarily work in the restaurant space. And so, I think that as you look at 2027 and what does your strategy look like for 2027 in social, it sounds like it's continued investment at the national level, but with a continued coaching approach for the local.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Interesting.
And some bribery.
And bribery and contests and, best practice share and high spotlight and all that jazz. Well, let's dig in a little bit on PR, right? So we have Zach on the call. He is an expert in this space, and PR has gone through a bit of a renaissance in the last 2 years because, as Ashley mentioned, we bow to the gods of Google and AI now, and we want to show up everywhere. And so PR has become a really important part of that equation because news content made a mistake forever ago, and all of it is scrapable and free. And so, Zach, I want to hear from you as you're talking to brands and they're planning for 2027. How are they fitting PR where maybe they didn't before? And like, how are they rethinking the importance of PR in their plans for the future?
yeah, first of all, I have to say it was getting dark there for a little while. So thank God.
Mhm.
PR is kind of, it was very hard to quantify for a long time. And so I think a lot of organizations were super skeptical around that. And I think that because of the focus on GEO, AEO, AIO, whatever we're going to settle on, who knows, that ultimately has unlocked an ability for all firms really to be able to track this stuff in a lot more effective manner, which I think has made our lives a lot easier, and it's a lot more palatable for a board of directors who doesn't know marketing, at all, to be able to look at a spreadsheet or to be able to look at a report and say, this is working, this is not working, here's why. And I think that, that is the primary reason why I'm seeing it become a pretty massive focal point in a lot of people's strategies going
Mm.
into 2027 and even going into this year into 2026. There were brands that I was hearing from that I had been told no 7 ways till Sunday that magically decided that they, wanted to do PR for the first time, or they at least wanted to dip their toe into it,
Mm.
simply because they saw how important it was for them to be able to control the outcomes of how people were finding them. I'm seeing
Okay.
that really on both sides, but I would say most commonly we are seeing it with some industries on the national consumer side with brands that are in a pretty niche industry. And so
Mhm,
they really
mhm,
need to kind of control that outcome and really control their destiny online, because they know that if they're not going to do it, then their next niche competitor is going to do
mhm,
it. And there's a
mhm.
big opportunity to be able to overtake the poke space or whatever it might be.
Well,
So
and
that is
so I wanna dig in a little bit on tracking and tracking PR because that's been notoriously, shady
hard.
in my
Well, tracking
experience.
marketing in general, obviously,
Well,
is
tracking marketing in general is attribution is not a thing. And so, but Zach, before we do that, I want to pick your brain a little bit on it. It does feel like it's a bit of a first mover. You're trying to get a first mover advantage in that
Mhm.
AI race. And to get that first mover advantage, you're engaging with the PR team that can churn out content, whether it's placing it on the wire or placing placements with different publications. Is that the feeling of like, okay, we got to be first to this. We don't quite know what we're doing, but we have to be first to it, and this is going to be one of the things that we add to the mix.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think that it's really divided into two different types of brands. So there are some brands that are in super niche categories that are really trying to be the first person to be mentioned because nobody was being mentioned before
Hmm.
and it wasn't
Hmm.
indexing very well on us from an SEO perspective, and so this is the kind of their kick in the butt to figure it out. And then there are others where, because of this renaissance of PR and GEO becoming a more, a larger, focus for boards of directors who have no idea
Hmm.
what it even means. I think that has really made it a lot easier to quantify competitive analysis online and really from a presence perspective, how you're comparing to other brands. And so I think that it's made benchmarking a lot easier, at least for us and definitely for the brand. And so there were ways to do it, but it was fairly convoluted in the past. And I think that
Hmm.
now it has become a lot easier. And so, brands that are really massive that are maybe fifth in category in pizza, like their goal is to become fourth, right? And that's what they establish. And in the past, we were tracking ad value and things like that that
Right.
are vanity, candidly, kind of
That's right.
not really. They're not really reliable metrics. I will put it. I will
Hmm.
put it
Hmm.
eloquently, uneloquently, another way. But I would say that
Hmm.
that has shifted so much because we are able to see that, Papa John's is here, Domino's is there, Pizza Hut is there. Like if you're Pizza Hut, like you want to get to that place, and there is a pretty prescriptive way of how to do that.
Hmm.
It costs a lot of money to do, of course,
Hmm.
depending
Hmm.
on how popular the category is, but that's the way that people are thinking about it more and more. And so I think that it is a first mover, but it is also kind of vying for position a little bit too. And I think that
Hmm.
you are able to do that through PR. And it's not just the big stuff store, it's not just the big placements too. The small stuff does add up. It ultimately
Yeah.
just depends on what is being said in there. Because again, like I would argue PR is probably considered to be more earned, but the reason for that is because you can't control the outcome, right? Like you
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
know what you can bribe them under the table to kind of use, Ashley's point in the same way you do to franchisees to reporters if you really want, but they don't have to listen to you. So I think that is the hard part.
Yeah.
and
Well, and to your point, go ahead, Ashley.
Well, I was gonna say, I think, like, to your point about, like, the big stories and, like, everybody, I think people that's a mistake a lot of people make is they're like, they chase press coverage to say they got it and they got this big story. And, like, the people will celebrate something that, like, nobody actually read or cares about and overlook that little local franchisee piece that actually could have driven traffic and that local engagement to
Mhm.
that location that, like, that's actually something that could be actual dollars as opposed to some national piece that probably a couple people looked at and did that actually get people through the door? Probably not. So, like, You
Mhm.
have to look at, like, where is the value in the PR? Like, is that national piece gonna
Mhm.
get you some things, and is it something you can merchandise, and does it make everybody feel good? Yes. Does it help the egos of your team? 1,000%. But is
Mhm.
that actually getting people in the door? Maybe that local piece did way more than that national piece did, and people don't look at it that way when they're looking at what did the piece actually do.
Yeah, and I would say, with my background in PR, what I saw was, the collapse of the news industry has created a supply and demand issue in that
Mhm.
the way that we used to do media relations, it was really important to establish relationships with the reporters, and that's how we got our stories in. And now, there's probably a third of the reporters now than there was even 5 years ago, and so your access or your opportunity to make those placements diminishes. And so when Zach kind of talks about those dark times, that's what we saw. And also we saw that's why PR was starting to delve into social, starting to delve into some non kind of PR activities. But what we're seeing is that the gods of Google has decided that these placements and the backlinking and the authority building still happens in that PR space. And so to Ashley's point, where PR was holding kind of a brand awareness play, and it was very top of funnel, almost above top of funnel. It's now become that brand awareness play, but also a connector to
Mhm.
increase your SEO, increase your GEO, and really fuel organic discovery of all of your other owned organic properties.
Very eloquently put. That's how I would say it that way myself. So
Okay, great. Well, let's talk a little bit about email. So we covered social, we covered PR. Let's talk about email. I have a hot take on email. I think AI is the next, or email is the next thing that AI is going to kill. And the reason I say that is that there are more and more people I'm hearing are allowing their AI to read and answer their emails. We've already seen a shift, more than a couple of years ago when Google started categorizing the emails for you. So at the very least, we're going to start seeing in the inboxes some AI categorization where your promotional messages are going to become obsolete. And so while we can fight the fight, and we absolutely, email is an important part of your messaging strategy, I am curious as to how we're going to kind of pivot on how that direct touch point that we get with email when AI comes for the inboxes. And that's not something that we need to have an opinion on right now or get into, but I think that for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to pretend that AI disruption is at least 18 months in the future. And so tell me, how are you guys thinking about email and email strategy going into 2027?
Well, first of all, I think it's hilarious that that is your opinion, and I agree with you, but I'm saying it's hilarious because at the beginning of this, you said that if you were gonna invest in something,
I
you
know.
were invest in email, and now you're saying that email is gonna die.
I know.
So
I
that's
told you I
just
was going to contradict myself later.
she promised. She
You
promised, and she
did, you did.
delivered.
That's true. That's true. You warned us. Yeah. So I think the way that we're looking at email strategy is really, it's all about personalization and making sure your message is tailored to that person. Like, if you're not doing that right now in 2026, I think there's a problem. Like, everybody
Hmm.
shouldn't be getting the same message depending on how they're interacting with your brand, because we have the ability to do it. So, like, are there times that it makes sense that everybody gets a broad message? Yes. Like, for example, when it's a big thing in my world is National Chicken Wing Day. I know most people don't care about that day, but it's a big thing in my world. And so, does everybody need to hear about that and what's going on National Chicken Wing Day in the same way? Yes, because all the things that are happening, everybody needs to know about. Outside of that, when there's something going on, if you're somebody that always comes in and gets burgers, maybe I want to tell you about something else because I don't want you to just come in and get burgers. I want you to talk about something else. Or maybe there's
Hmm.
something specific to burgers that I want to tell you about. Or maybe you haven't been in a long time, so I want to entice you with something about burgers. Like,
Hmm.
there are things that you need to get a different message than somebody that, comes in weekly. That
Hmm.
person doesn't needs a different message than somebody that comes in once a quarter. And so being able to tailor those messages to people for something that's going to resonate with them, or knowing somebody that always comes in on Wednesdays because kids eat free. They have kids. I want to send them messages that
Hmm.
have something to do with kids. Somebody that never comes in and doesn't ever buy a kids meal. Well, they probably don't have kids. They don't care about that stuff. I want to talk to them about something else. So it's the personalization piece of it. I think that is really a big focus for us, is how can we further continue to customize those messages? Because those are the ones that people are going to actually open. to your point, whether their AI reads it to them
Exactly.
and tells them that, but
Well, but that's where I think that is the first step to arming your or protecting your email program is that personalization. Because if you think about, okay, what is the robot going to serve the human? They're going to serve something that's specific to them. And so if I have a it's your birthday message, for example, hey, obviously they're getting a lot of those, so it's a bad example, but if you have a message around, hey, you've had a lot of chicken fingers lately, have you tried our new sauce? The robot might say, oh, they have tried a lot of chicken fingers, so they're going to be interested in the new sauce. And so I do think that the first kind of levy that you would put up of protection on your email is investing in how are we personalizing, segmenting, and getting hyper customized in the email. So I think that that's right on. And just to continue with you for a second, how are you doing that? Is it through technology and platforms, and is it expensive? Give us a little bit of a behind the
yes, yes, and yes. All of the above through technology platforms, and it's expensive. So with our loyalty program, they're rolling out new things about advanced messaging. And so we're actually in the process right now of redoing all of that because of new technology that they've rolled out. And so we're going through the process right now of like ripping apart all of our messaging and putting it
Okay.
all back together. Because we have some
Okay.
customization right now, but it's with the new stuff that they've rolled out, we have more capabilities of how to do it. So in doing that, the way that we're doing it to try to do it as smart as possible is I don't even want to layer on top of it. It's like, let's just rip it all and start from scratch. Like we have nothing and
Mhm.
rebuild instead of
Mhm.
trying to, just plug in holes of well, here's the new things that we can do. It's like, let's just start from the beginning to make it as customized as possible.
And are you resourcing that? So one of the brands that I'm working with, we have thought about resourcing specifically for email. Now their capacity is a little bit bigger as far as the number of things that they're doing through email, but it does feel like it is because of the customization that's needed. I almost need a dedicated resource to really optimizing it.
Potentially. So I've talked to some people that like do loyalty program optimization as a whole. And so
Mm-hmm.
that they can see like, okay, how our point of sale works with the loyalty program. We also have a pretty sophisticated tech stack because we like to have like the best of the best in everything. So like while our point of sale would do online ordering and would do a loyalty program, like it has all of those capabilities if we wanted to use just that. But the loyalty program doesn't do all the things we want it to do. It's not as sophisticated as the loyalty program that we have. So instead of using that, we layer a more sophisticated loyalty program on top of it. The online ordering isn't as sophisticated as we want it to be, so we layer a different online ordering on top of it. So we have to make sure that all of these technologies talk to each other in the right
Hmm.
way and nothing breaks and all of that. So all of those partners need to work together. So doing that, it's like we might need somebody to come in to help make sure they're all talking to each other the right way instead of me, who is not the most technology savvy person. I can make things work, but that's not really the seat that I sit in. So
Right.
it's a possibility. We're just getting into it. So we'll see how technological it gets if I need to bring somebody in to help.
Okay, good deal. Zach, what are you seeing in the email space, and are there anybody doing anything interesting from the seat that you sit in?
There is a lot of hyper-segmenting that I think is starting to happen, and there are many technologies that are starting to focus on that a little bit more. I think that, CRM capabilities are getting better, ESP capabilities are getting better, but I think that the 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 vendor bloat, I think, is going to be the ultimate problem here, in my opinion. I think that there's just a lot of different vendors that are doing bits and pieces of things, and
Well, we
there's
just heard it from Ashley,
Yeah.
right?
right, and like that kind of reinforces the point to me. I think
Mhm.
that for something that I do think is, important if used properly, I find that, at least for my team, if I'm using an example, I was just telling you guys before I got on the call, I was getting super excited about somebody wanting to do something very customized, super proactive, and not just kind of waiting for somebody to come to them. They're going to them. And that
Mhm.
is more interesting to me. I think that email, if used as a proactive, channel, I think is a lot more effective rather than being reactive, because I think that the reactivity loses its personality a little bit in my perspective. So,
Well, and that's a great point. Like thinking about email as paid, right? And so
mhm.
how are you, when you're thinking about layering on some non-traditional media properties, is email a paid media platform that might be an interesting investment? I've used email as paid, and then the way I position it is almost like a cheaper direct mail, right? So obviously you're going to the mailbox, and yes, you're not
Correct.
getting as many eyeballs, but you're getting the subject line and you're getting your brand name. So same thing with like, but they are walking it to the trash can. So they're seeing that, you're at least getting eyeballs on the brand awareness. And so email as paid media, I do think is an underdeveloped, at least in the franchising space, medium to explore for sure.
100%. That's something that I see as being more viable. I think that email for me, if done informationally, it shouldn't just be putting things in there for the sake of putting it in there. Like, at least for me, like how I think about my own personal branding, like I want something that people are reading in my emails that they can't find anywhere else, or it would take them a
Mhm,
lot of work to find if they were to do it on
mhm,
their own, right? Like
mhm,
I'm doing heavy lifting that they would have to really, really search to figure out,
mhm.
and then they get my opinion on it too if they really want that, right? And
Yeah.
I think that that's something that a lot of brands, whether it's consumer or if it's B2B centric, like that's something that, you know, I wish and hope that people were trying to do, which is why I think in a lot of ways that the podcast era is becoming a thing. People are kind of trying to take matters into their own hands when it comes to the reactive piece of it. But proactively speaking, I do think of email as being much more effective if it's viewed as a paid channel, if you have to
Mhm,
use it.
mhm,
But to me, I've kind of shown this my entire career. I'm more of a texting guy myself. So I just
mhm,
kind of,
mhm.
see that across all different channels, whether it's friend dev or consumer, just because I just think that while there has been struggles with if it should be, if it's getting a little bit too businessy in the differences between it being business oriented and casual, I think is the struggle. It's like texting has a bit of an identity crisis.
Well, it's
And
not
I
just an identity crisis, it's also a regulation crisis, right? Because there are and continue to be restrictions put on how businesses can use texting that makes it very difficult to overinvest in texting as a channel. Because you're absolutely right. If we could develop out a texting program like an email program, and you can, but the problem is that there are just so many regulations regarding text that it does make it hard to know what's gonna come next in that space to make the investments there.
Yeah, I would say so. I think you're right. But I think that, I am much more bullish on that as a channel as people develop. If you're really, really looking to get the attention of somebody,
Mhm.
like I
Yeah.
know I'm crazy, so I know that I'm looking at both, but I know most people are gonna be much I know that if I email Ashley, it's gonna take 3 days, but if I text her, I know she's gonna respond in like 2 minutes, right? So like
Mhm.
True story.
there
Yeah.
is a difference between that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Alright, I'm gonna wrap us up. I have one more question for you guys today. What's the one thing you tell a franchise marketing team to stop doing right now?
go ahead, Ash.
Oh, that's a hard one. I mean, stop chasing every shiny object because there's too many. Like, that's the thing. Because if, like, I want the team to be, every team needs to be looking at what is coming out and what's happening and, you know, all of those things. And we need to be the ones staying ahead of it and not letting our franchisees come to us and say, what about this? What are you doing about this thing? And we're like, we've never heard about this thing. Like, you need to make sure that your team knows what's going on. But at the same time, there are so many things that are happening and so many things that are changing that if that's all you're focused on is staying on top of all of those trends, you're
Mhm.
not going to get anything done in your current strategy and everything else is going to fall apart while you're chasing all the trends.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
For me, I would say that my biggest pet peeve as like an executive at a place is that I find that I really struggle when people they give me the problem, but they don't come to me with the solution. And I think that
Mhm,
executives in the franchise space, founders, or if it's a CEO, or if it's a board or an FAC, they don't want to know what the problem is and have it be restated. They know that most of the time, right? Like what they want to
mhm,
know is how you're going to solve it. And I think that focusing on the shiny object, and sometimes founders are like, hey, go check this out. Like it's your job to basically tell them we're not going to focus on that right now, or we're going to focus on it at this time because this is what I see as being the best way to solve this problem that I know we have, right? And I
mhm,
think that,
mhm.
you know, I work with my family, so I literally face that on a Saturday afternoon at like 1 p.m. when I'm doing something completely different, right? So, I mean, but everybody has that reality where somebody tells them that they need to solve something and they saw this podcast, or worst comes to worst, they heard somebody talking about it at a conference or
Mhm.
something like that. And you're don't try to keep your attention on the thing that you know is going to solve the problem rather than, just trying to plug one hole and then see another hole spout up behind you, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, love it. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today on this episode of Franchise Marketing Spotlight.